Awesome. Good evening and welcome to Scalehouse Voices featuring Daniela Repas. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Seifert, board member at Scalehouse Collaborative for the Arts. Scalehouse is a nonprofit arts organization located in Bend, Oregon. Our focus is on creativity, collaboration, and conversation. We believe that our future presents complex challenges and opportunities, not just benefiting from creativity, but requiring it. Throughout the year, we convene thinkers and makers for in-depth discussion, artistic expression, and hands-on collaboration, including exhibitions, artist talks, and the annual Bend Design Conference. Thanks to the Deschutes County Art and Cultural Grant, Scalehouse Voices is on its 4th season. Voices is a series of talks and featuring nationally and internationally acclaimed artists, designers, and scholars exploring ideas and techniques, practice and process, creativity and culture. We're excited to launch the 2021 Virtual Voices series with The Still Line of a Movement from Daniela Repas. Daniela is a Bosnian-born animation and time-based media artist who lives and works in Portland, Oregon. Her work depicts storytelling through multiple mediums, from drawing and animation to installation and film, and is rooted in Bosnian culture and diaspora. She has shown her work nationally and internationally, participating as an artist, a curator, and as a founding member of DripDrop Collective. She is a participant of the prestigious Dorothy Lemelson Scholarship and an alumna of Pacific Northwest College of Art, where she earned her MFA in Visual Studies. Her debut as a film director of the award-winning short film Mnemonics steered her work to the intersection of film and art. In 2019, she was a recipient of the Prince Grace Award for Film, and in 2020 became an IEFTA selected emerging filmmaker. There will be a Q&A session after Daniela's talk, but please feel free to submit your questions at any time in the Q&A box below. And please join me in welcoming Daniela Repas.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well and see me well. I guess, thank you, Lauren, for such a great introduction. And thank you, Jenna, for being our backstage maestro. And thank you, Scalehouse, for having me as a part of Voices program. It's such a great opportunity to share my work and be a part of Oregon arts community. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And also I wanted to thank everyone that is here, even though I can't see any of you, which is really bizarre because I feel like I'm just talking to myself. But I guess that's how we do things now. So here we go. So let's see, okay. All right. Can someone just let me know if everything is in order as far as like seeing my screen? Are we good? Yes? I assume so.
Great.
Wait.
Oh, no, great. You look great.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. So again, thank you for being here for my art talk. What I called it the still line of a movement because I really suck at titles, and but that is really what I'm very much interested in this tension between stillness and movement. And in this talk, I will tell you a little bit about my thought process, my process in my studio, my collaboration with artists and incredible people that come across my path, and then show you some of my work that is mostly recent. But to do all of that, I feel like I really need to introduce where I come from. As Lauren mentioned, I was born and raised in Bosnia, and left after I was probably in my late teens, about 16, 17 when I left Bosnia, and about 20 when I left Europe. but it is very important because a lot of my work thematically is drawn from those roots, from that background. And when I meet new people and when I tell them about where I'm from, if they don't know anything about Balkans, I usually tell them to watch a film by Emir Kusturica called Underground. And I've decided to kind of start this talk as well with that, with these two slides, because I think that they really capture Balkans, at least my experience of Balkans, in a lot of ways. Not only from my personal perspective, but also my family kind of function in this way, where it goes from one extreme to another. And Emir Kusturica, as a filmmaker, was one of the first impacts on my own understanding of how to translate this Balkan culture beyond its borders. And even though that he is very theatrical, he's very, his humor is present in all of that, which is definitely not something that I do in my work. I usually make people cry, good cry, I guess. But I wanted to show these two images because they are really closely relating to how I started thinking about film. And this is where I am right now. So I'm gonna go from present to talk about my work. And my latest project, Dogs of Home, was a project that I did as my thesis work while I was at a visual studies program at Halle Ford Graduate Studies. It was something that I wanted to approach to, I wanted to kind of understand what was happening in Bosnia right now. And my idea was to interview people that lived there. And I was fortunate enough to get Princess Grace grant to go and film. But there was really not a lot of time because I was still in school and I am a mom. So there was no time for me to spend enough time with people to get to this intimate level, to get these intimate connections with them, to really understand how are people living 20 years after the war happened and 20 years after I left. Even though I go and visit, but it's very different. Usually it's connected with family and all that stuff. So I was, one night I was actually putting my son to sleep, and that's usually when I have time to think because it's all dark and quiet. And I was frantically trying to figure out how to interview these people because I had an idea about, 6 to 7 people so I can have like a larger scope and understanding. And it was just not possible to do that in, what I had 10 days overall to travel and to film and to come back. And that's when it hit me that it was really not about this, what you see right now, like it's not about this grand vision of Balkans, that Kusturica was doing and, in the films that I was looking at. And it wasn't about, it wasn't coming from all these texts that I was reading. What was really coming from is, from the source, from me and from my family. And I remember that moment when I realized that there was like a sense of relief, but I just started crying because I knew that that's going to be much harder to do because, it's kind of like taking a shovel and digging in your own wound because it was much easier to think about this project where I was just this filmmaker, an artist trying to like understand someone else, but then going to yourself and to your own family, obviously much harder to do. So for Dogs of Home, which is the title of the film and the project, I decided to interview my grandparents. And my grandfather actually passed away a couple of months ago. And this film now has even a greater meaning for my family and myself. But I'm so happy that I got to be there in these moments and collect all this footage of him and my grandmother. So when I was filming them, it was really easy to get to that subject that I was after, to that understanding of, what happens in that day-to-day life in Bosnia, because they were my grandparents. I knew them already intimately. I knew every wrinkle on their face. I knew the house. I grew up in that house. I knew how they operated, and it was really intense, but it was also very satisfying and incredible to get to know them on this different level. And this subject of Bosnia, like I mentioned, it was kind of a thread through all of my work. Now came to this very personal, very real access point to me as well. And I realized that until this project, I feel like I was just kind of trying to peek into that subject and not really like diving into it. And Dogs of Home really brought that. And it's a short film that was created as this intersection of my thinking about animation, thinking about film, thinking about all these subjects, how I can, thinking about documentary genre specifically. Because, when I decided to, I was working professionally before I came to graduate studies as an editor for a feature documentary film. And, the more I learned about documentary, the more I realized that interviewing people, yes, it's a very important part in the genre to like bring these real stories, bring these recollections and memories. But then when I was, applying that to my project, I realized that, not only that I don't only think in that way, but that there were all these layers that I felt that are better represented through my different medium, through my mind that works within animation, within animated installation, and within poetry, within sound and music. So the Dogs of Home was my second attempt to bring in these two, like live footage and animation, this fiction and nonfiction together in order to kind of create a larger scope of the story, a better understanding, a better insight. Because I feel that, when we tell a story, when we tell a recollection or a memory, it's one thing to say this or that happened, but then to really capture the emotion, the scent, the sound, all these things, I feel that there are so many mediums within art that can really offer that, So, and this process was very different as well, because I was just by myself. There were a couple of friends that helped out from my town that brought in gear and all this stuff. But and my mom was there as my assistant. We traveled together for this project, which was great. But it was very difficult to manage this whole process of film set that otherwise looked like this. So this was the set from my first short film, Mnemonics, where I was surrounded with incredible talent, incredible people that were just so great in their own respective fields that I could then focus, like on directing. I could focus on all these things while I was in this scenario. I had to think about, all the technical aspects, look through the lens and find the composition while interviewing and directing. But, it was something that was very interesting, but I don't think that I would want to repeat it again anytime soon, because it does kind of take away from, it just chips away from each one of those elements a little bit when you're alone doing all of that. And I spend a lot of time alone anyways in the studio right here, drawing. So this kind of scenario where there is, you know, people and collaboration, you know, it's something that is incredibly important in my work. That's why I brought these two slides, one next to another, because I wanted to kind of, I wanted to show you these two main aspects of my process. It's either me alone for a long periods of time, or surrounded, you know, with people and collaborating with artists, with creators, with makers, which brings me so much joy that it doesn't only reflect in my film work, it reflected through all these different large-scale installations and projects that I've done before that. So the Dogs of Home, and I wanted to show you, I'll play here a trailer really shortly, but it was, you know, it resonated from this studio practice to the film set, you know, in this very, very fluid kind of transition because of that, because it was just me doing all of it, except for my collaboration with my sister. So my sister wrote prose, poetry for the film. We collaborate pretty much for my first show that we made together in while we were refugees in Geneva, where I was, you know, drawing at the time, and she was writing poetry, and then we just kind of combined them together. And from that point, like, you know, she brings voice, she brings this sound, if so to speak, to all of my characters, because I am very much a visual artist, and I don't even attempt to interpret these subjects, these themes, these characters through written word. So besides her, I was the composer Todd, that also one of my collaborators for now, I believe 20 years that we've been working together. He's also one of the founding members of DripDrop Collective. And, but besides that, yeah, all the animation and it was just kind of a solo thing. So I'm going to show you the trailer really quick, and then I'll come back to it again.
Put kući uvijek znam. Evo ga, urezan na dlanu, ko sudbina. Svaki otkucaj srca je zvuk mojih koraka, kako nisput dolazim na kapiju.
So you notice that there's really no live footage in the trailer, and it was really tricky to cut this because in such a short time, you know, it's very difficult to go from animation to live footage because they don't necessarily marry that easy. And you know, the animation served as this like bookend to the live footage, as this fictional story, which was based off of the memory that I had of an event that happened to me a long time ago in Bosnia. You know, not so important at this moment, but it was again this trying to figure out how to connect memory with, you know, like the real life recollection, you know, like, and real life evidence of people. And animation just really brings that tool. I mean, when I talk about animation with other artists or people, I always mention to them that in animation there is no gravity, meaning that, you know, you are really free to create this magical realism that I'm very interested in. It's present in my heritage. Bosnians are, at least my family, you know, there's always this kind of like path. You're always going on this path that is between what's real and what's not real. And this not real aspect sometimes very much is regarded as a reality. So animation allows me to go into those spaces. And it's something that from the first time when I realized that, you know, my drawings can move, that can, you know, bring this life into an image, into a still image, I was just hooked. I mean, my background really is as an illustrator, you know, through drawing and painting. I was trying to kind of create these worlds, but there was something missing, even though they always were very similar to what you're seeing on the screen. There was movement, there was motion in it. They were still so very still for me. And once I started animating them, you know, that was kind of like one of those aha moments in your practice. And I wanted to show you these stills as well, because when they sometimes actually have greater importance for me as an artist rather than the final, you know, project, the films, because I like holding them. I like looking at them. I like touching them. That's why I draw my animation on paper, is because, not because, you know, it is not digitally possible, but I just love the tactility of how paper feels, how pencil feels when you touch, you know, that surface. And then when you have the stacks and stacks of them, which you can see right here, this is kind of what they look like when they are, you know, set in my studio. Then, you know, a lot of times I come back to them and they, you know, all of a sudden have a completely different purpose. There is a completely different purpose for a character. There is a part of this storyline. But then, you know, when you view them in these, like, through these objects, almost like these drawings, then I use them and I try to explore them in a different way. For example, yeah, so there is a project that I did while I was at the PNCA at the Glass Studio, where I basically took, I think there is audio as well. I took just one part of the animation. That was a part of the Dogs at Home animation sequence. And I created this character in installation, and a lot of them really end up as these experiments, you know, something that is just kind of like trying to figure out, you know, okay, well, let's see how this can fit in this way. I'm very playful in my work, in my process. I love experiments. I love unexpected things, you know, that occur, because animation and large scale installation and film require a lot of planning, you know, so because of that rigid plan that you have to have, like I have, you know, have to leave space for these surprises, you know, for these experiments. And you know, they're so essential in what comes at the end or for the next project, because sometimes, like in this case scenario, I actually found this while I was making this slideshow. I forgot about it completely. And this is animation from mnemonics that really never happened. This is only like in digital format. And I was thinking about creating a multi-channel installation and edited this together, you know, with audience in mind. Then that's video installation, or, you know, multimedia installation as a medium is still by far my favorite medium to work in, because there's so much that offers. Not only the time is edited by audience and the storyline is edited by audience. So I have this, you know, like we're almost collaborating then in real time. You know, so you have to be aware of the space, of the physical space, and of the physical physicality of bodies that are occupying that space. So, you know, I play around and, you know, I come up with these things, and, you know, maybe this at some point this might come into something, or, you know, develop into like a project or something. But what it did come out of these animation cells is the installation that I did in PNCA in 2017. So as I mentioned, these drawings, these animation cells are they hold important place in my own practice. And I wanted to show them. I wanted to show all of them. So I put them on a display in the sequences, in their respective sequences. And then on the screen here, you will see on the bottom, there was a screen that was showing the animation that comes out of all these drawings. So even though I like to use, optical illusions, like magical realism and all these things within the work, I'm also very transparent about my process, because I think that there's something so cool when you see where it comes from, where you can see like sequence of 15 drawings that are just, different, just so little. And then when you see them, move in front of you, and what a different experience of all of those images is when you see them in these two different forms. And that kind of brings me to why, to my obsession about this tension that happens between still image and moving image. The drawing will always be present in my work. I really don't see it disappearing. It keeps morphing. It keeps doing all these different things, but it's always there. And it's always just pencil. All this stuff is just pencil and paper. In this case scenario, it's just pencil on white wall. And then here you can see a projection of animation that overlaps with that drawing. And these two images, I think they really capture that tension very well, because you can see where the projector is illuminating the drawing, and then the part that is kind of in the shadow. And I just love that play that happens not only with this idea of life and death, but also this play of light and dark. And since my work is very black and white as well, so light brings all these hues that bring more of like a tonal palette that I'm interested in. So again, for this project that I'm about to show you, I wanted to again show you how all of my work is really based on collaboration. And for this particular installation, this is my cohort. I don't know why it's not working properly. My cohort that I miss so much, and it's so bizarre seeing this image right now that we are all kind of so close and touching each other. But I was directing them how to position me, because I needed that pose for the animation. There was no other way for me to do this but for them to lift me up, because in this reality, gravitation is very much a real thing. So I needed to create this illusion of hovering midair, and all these hands kind of holding it, and they were just so great. I just love this footage so much, because it really shows that, how I'm dependent on collaboration with people. And then, so the project that came out of that was this installation that, as I said, the drawings were on the wall, just pencils of drawings of these hands. And then I projected animation that was just outlining the figure. This piece is actually one of my favorites, because it was during my grad studies, and in grad school, you really don't have a lot of time to finish something, and you are doing so much research. And at that point, I was already doing research on dogs of home. So this project really came out of, as much, it was as close as to intuition and to raw feeling as, something that I've done, when I was in my early 20s. And that's why I love it so much, because it didn't need a lot of explanation for me why, it just happened. But the projection was, I couldn't really fit it between you know, the walls. So it's, you know, so it kind of perfect. I couldn't the way flag it around the image. And then I realized, like, you know, I'm going to just put this frame around it and follow the actual projection screen. And then, you know, once that frame happened, I realized that I'm again bringing this idea of cinema back into my installation, because I'm constantly playing between these two worlds, between these two understanding of time, you know, a timeline and time as in within storytelling, where in film I see it as this very linear representation of time, and where I tell a story to my audiences, while in installation there is this very much a circular thing that happens, because it depends on audience when they enter, when they exit the piece itself, and then again you know, their agency in editing, you know, the story. In this scenario, you can see this little box on the floor there. So that's where the projector was, and when people would stand in front of it, they would block the projection, so, and reveal the drawing, because, you know, the animation was synced to the drawing. I think it's shown right here at the beginning. Oh no. Right here, you can see that there is an actual drawing behind it. And, you know, sometimes they're like perfectly synced, or sometimes, you know, they're a little bit off. But when people would block the projection, the animation would just kind of, that movement would disappear. And there was, again, this stillness that was left. And the most bizarre feeling that would happen is when, because she's blinking here, when you stand in front of it, all of a sudden, you know, there's no movement, there's no life, and all of a sudden you feel like there's this just emptiness, like not necessarily death, but definitely you know, absence of life. So in this project, I did a lot of thinking through making, and that's sometimes very fruitful in my process, you know, where I don't necessarily spend a lot of time like researching something, but I actually just like dive into a project and then figure out a whole lot of things while making it, and then apply them to the next one. So you know, again, here you can see that tension that is happening between, you know, like the projection and the drawing. And I started thinking about how to, it's really this corner that I stared a lot while I was, you know, creating this project, and then, you know, documenting and everything. But it was in this corner that I found this potential for inquiry, for future projects, which would really be about deconstructing like a film scene into an installation. And I started thinking about how to represent the protagonist, let's say, that would be in a film scene in the real space. So I made these sculptures with animations in them, you know, like that were the life size of the body that was there, you know, even though that most of it was missing, but, you know, it was enough for people to relate to it physically, as if there is somebody standing right there. So that was my first experiment in kind of like figuring out how to bring in, you know, a person that would otherwise be in a film screen into an installation, or on a film scene into an installation. And then I went further and started thinking about how would that relate to the background, you know, like, because as you would compose a shot, you know, like that's how I was composing this installation. And all of this is very experimental based. Like the animation that you can see here is very crudely kind of a replica of the one that you saw before this. And then the grass behind is just something I found online, just as a standing, because it wasn't really about the visuals, it was about figuring out the elements. And then once they were placed together, let's go to the next slide, there we go. In the space, it really started becoming something that, that I started getting excited about, because you can see this little speaker. It had a separate audio channel that would ideally present like a dialogue between two people. Then, you know, the projection of the grass was like, you know, all encompassing, while these were on these screens that I made out of vellum and just, you know, little pieces of wood, very crudely made, but again, you know, something that I was just trying to figure out how to bring physicality of a body within this imagined world of a film scene. And the cool thing really happened because since it was vellum, they became these kind of holograms. And because the audio was separate, it really depended on your position to the object, how you were experiencing it. So which was my first clue, like, okay, I really need to follow this, because that's exactly what I'm wondering about, whether, you know, how would you experience a story if you are closer or further away from what the two main characters are talking about. And this was, you know, it was great to see how people also, like, you know, were positioning themselves in this space. And since this was at the end of my studies, and I had to kind of decide whether I'm going to follow the film or follow the installation, I followed the film, and I never went back to this project, but it's something that I'm really eager to come back to. And I thought that it was important to mention it because it is where I see my future after my current project finishes, is to really decipher this, what I'm after, this question of whether a documentary can be better told in a film medium or with an installation medium. And I'm really betting on installation because I feel like, you know, in real life, even though if we share the same event, we all perceive it in a very different way, which is much closer to the medium of installation than it is to a medium of film, since it's still, again, like storyteller telling you what was happening. But that's on hold for a little while until future. And this brings me to my current project. Let me just check on time. Oh, we're good. So my current project that I'm very, very excited about, it's a first time that I'm going after a feature film. And not only a feature film, but feature animation film. Pour the Water As I Leave came to life really right after I graduated. So at the beginning of quarantines and all of that happened to us. It was supposed to, again, follow this play between animation and live action, and between fiction and nonfiction. And then once I was done with my treatment, I was fortunate enough that my dear friend, an incredibly talented filmmaker, Vu Pham, was willing to start collaborating with me on the story itself, and then to write a screenplay for this, which is something completely new in my process, because all the films that I've made, which is, you know, like I think 3 on my own and a couple that I collaborated with others, they had some, you know, cryptic storyboards, and, you know, that's about it. One of them had a very developed storyboard that resembled more like a graphic novel than a storyboard, but never a screenplay, never something that is so close to the medium of film, that I'm very excited that this project has it, because it opens up, it gives me access to this medium from a whole different perspective. And it is, this film is docufiction, meaning that there's still a fictional story that kind of is a cradle for all these real interviews from real people. So the two main protagonists kind of they lead the narrative and then introduce people with their interviews and with their story as the film goes along. So the idea was to again film the real people in live footage, like I did for Dogs of Home with my grandparents, and then to do the fictional story with animation. But it's just, you know, the more me and Vu talked about it, the more I was just kind of not happy about the idea of constant jumping back and forth from animation to live action. And honestly, it was kind of an intimidating decision to just say like, okay, well, this has to be animation all the way. And once that decision was made, all of a sudden, a whole world opened up, because now these real people were allowed to enter the fictional world without skipping a beat, like all of us, because as I mentioned, you know, there's no gravity in animation, so there is no rules. So therefore, like, there was no reason for them to not to occupy the same fictional space that the fictional characters do. And then I've decided, instead of, you know, using actors and using dialogue to rely on, I went with the dancers. And I was fortunate enough to meet Rena Butler, this incredible dancer and choreographer that is also a Princess Grace Award winner that was in my cohort. And it's from the first moment that we met, we knew that something will happen between us. And she's going to be a choreographer for the film. So what we're doing, we're basically interpreting this story through dance. And the main two lead dancers will lead the narrative, but then everybody else also will have that, will be dancers. And what we are focusing on is really gestures. Like, that's something that I got inspired by Rashad Newsome, and like incredible performances that I've witnessed here in Portland. Performance arts, it's just something that I draw a lot of my inspiration from, because there's this, you know, direct connection between artists and audiences. And I'm always in an awe when a great performance is happening. So the dancing is kind of something that we're not talking musical here. We're talking about these choreographed gestures that will allow people that don't necessarily have Bosnian background or Bosnian story to connect to this, because this story is really about, it's about exiting a war zone. It's about being forcefully displaced from your home. That is most definitely not only a Bosnian story. But as I do in everything else in my work, I always come from my own truth, and I offer that to audiences in order to speak to any subject, because I feel then in that way, not only that I'm offering my vulnerability, but it seems that then invites other people to be to come from the place of truth and honesty, and then we can have a conversation, and then we can build empathy, and then we can build understanding, which is really important for me to tell these stories in such light. Pour the Water As I Leave really highlights Bosnian diaspora and refugees, people that have been refugees just like myself and my family. And I didn't want to approach that from this place of victimhood, because, or this place where I've experienced myself, where a lot of people feel like, you know, when you're in these Western countries, all of a sudden, you know, you're regarded as like, you couldn't wait to, you know, get there. But there's so much that happens like before that. And it's actually really incredibly courageous to make that decision, to leave everything that you hold dear and go into the world, because that's the only solution that you have left. So, you know, Pour the Water As I Leave thematically follows that. And I thought that with dancing, just like I think with animation, that I can go into these like nuances of emotion, nuances of human of human things that we share that are, you know, I don't want to use universal as a word, but like something that can definitely cross these boundaries of borders of cultures, you know, like, because I know that they're out there, since I've spent a whole lot of time with, you know, people that are from all over the world that, you know, have experienced similar things to myself, but we found these, you know, points that we connected, and there, that's something that I'm going after. So I wanted to, let me see the time. Okay, so just really briefly, like, this is Jared Brown, another Princess Grace award winner that that I was kind of working with to understand how I can bring in animation into this. So this is really behind the scenes, you know, in my process, where I'm just kind of figuring out, like, okay, if he moves in real time, or, you know, if he moves in tens or twos or threes, or all these animation talk. And I will just show you, before I end this, I wanted to show you this. It's kind of like a proof of concept for this, but it is the latest work of mine. And it is in collaboration with John Summerson, who is the animation director for this film. Another dear friend of mine and a Princess Grace Award winner. So Princess Grace Foundation is gonna love this project. So here we go.
Moji prijatelji, bliski prijatelji i radne kolege išli su na tu drugu stranu. U tim njihovim pogledima se dosta toga vidjela. Nismo morali da pričamo, a nismo znali da ćemo se ikad više vidjeti. Mi jednostavno nismo mogli prestati da plačemo. Nismo mogli prestati da plačeš.
All right, and I leave you with this wonderful excerpt from Mark Dizdar, because again, poetry is significant in everything that I do, and it's going to be a huge part of this project as well through my sister's words. But yes, there is a lot to come. I'm excited about this project more than anything else that I've done so far, because it challenges a lot of things that I've, you know, and I hope you enjoyed all of this, and please ask me questions, because I'm really good at answering those.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That was incredible. Thank you for sharing so much about your practice. The questions have started coming in, and I'll get started if you're ready.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So our first person, this first question comes from Jessie Spies Werner. Oh. And she says, hey, Daniela. And she says, she's asking, your work is situated in the middle of film and animation and fine art. Is there one context that is better or more ideal for your work, or do you see the work in all of these contexts? Excuse me.
Yeah, well, that's something that, you know, ideally I could have literally one project in all of these three mediums, or actually at least in like film and installation, to just experiment and see which one would work better. But as I mentioned, I really do think that installation will eventually win, you know, because right now, I really don't consider myself a filmmaker. I really consider myself as an artist that is interested in the medium of film currently at this time, you know. So because it's a challenge for me to think like that, it's much easier for me to think in the sense of installation and all of the elements that installation brings. but film is very challenging to like then flatten it all, you know, like that's how I see it. I see it like flattened into something. Once I'm satisfied with that, you know, like I'm sure that I will then go back to back to installation, and then you know, try to answer all those questions that I was mentioning, you know, when I'm trying to like figure out how I can deconstruct film in real time, in real space, you know. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And just a reminder to everyone, you can ask questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Daniela is up for any questions about her work, so ask away. Our next question is from Sarah Abbott. She says, "Hi, Daniela. I'm really interested in your use of documentary film and animation, fiction and nonfiction. I wonder if you can talk a bit about how you perceive and develop characters, specifically your process in character development, when you're behind a camera versus when you're drawing characters with pencil."
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously, you know, like when I'm interviewing people, there's really, you know, so much I can control because a lot really comes from their story. But with this particular project, the Pour the Water as I Leave, there's a screenplay that is already written. And each one of those people that I will interview, they're written into the scenes that are happening in this fictional world. So whatever they bring us in their story, in their interview, will not really affect this fictional world that is happening around them. Because, you know, the subjects, the themes that I'm asking fit within that fictional scene that is happening. Now, I say fictional, but it really is based on these characters that I am creating from in this, you know, fictional reality. They are based either off of my memory or collective, you know, memory that, you know, that I've heard from people that I inspired or seen that it happened to someone else. So they're they're kind of result of all of that together, you know. So when I'm creating these, they are maybe more poetic versions of something that is real, you know, rather than they're completely invented, you know. In Pour the Water as I Leave, the two main characters are present in scenarios that I witnessed, you know, like, so all of the stuff that is happening to them actually really happened. But two of them necessarily didn't happen, you know, like, so they are constructs either of my own understanding of self. There's definitely a lot of projection of myself, of my own characteristics, or combination of like, you know, what, I don't know, a Bosnian man would be, a Bosnian woman, a Bosnian child, a Bosnian, you know, like grandpa would look like, you know, so, you know, like, so there is that's how this works, because they're all based in the reality. It's just, you know, like with the documentation of real people and their stories, obviously, you know, like that is what they tell me, and, you know, I keep true to that. But then with this fictional world, it's just, you know, drawing from reality and representing it in a more abstracted, poetical way within that like magical realism.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Next, we have a question from Ellen Santasiero. She asks, ideally, where would you like your work to be seen or experienced by people?
So I love theater. It's always been one of my favorite things in the world to go and see films. You know, there is a ritual about that, you know. I think that's when I made the first short film, I thought it was such a relief that there's like film festivals out there that are already organized, and all you have to do is just bring your thing and they'll take care of everything, you know, like there's already this like trained audience that know what to do, and like, you know, they just go inside and sit in this like, you know, and they share this experience of theater, of film and all that. So I enjoy that, but I really do enjoy where I can work within a specific building, specific place that I can then shape into the story, you know. But then again, like that's why I am between these two worlds, like, you know, with you know, film obviously, you know, brings me to this one platform, and then installation, you know, opens up like all of these different possibilities, you know. So it really depends on the story and what it wants to be.
Well said. Thank you. Let's see. Next we have one from Mickey or Mickey, I think. Hi, Daniela. As an artist, how does it feel to step away from creating and to become a viewer? What are some of your own reactions to seeing your work finalized? And thanks, amazing work.
Yeah. So I probably watch it once, you know, in a festival when it's on the big screen, because you always want to see it on the big screen. It's super cool. And then I don't, then I leave, because all I'm doing then is editing and trying to like, oh no, that's not, you know, like I should have like, because I also edit my stuff, and, you know, all I see is mistakes, not mistakes, but potential that can be developed into other projects, that's something that can be brought up. And, you know, it's hard sometimes, especially I just had a screening in San Diego, very intimate private screening at my friend's place. And as I mentioned, my grandpa passed away, and we're a very close family. So I was like, okay, I'll be, you know, first I was like, I'm not going to watch it. And then, you know, because the audience was really inviting and really great. And I was like, okay, I'll watch it. I'm fine. I'm in a great mood. And, you know, I was outside letting them, you know, I'm never really present with the audience. And as soon as it started, I just started crying. I mean, I just broke down, like, and so it's, you know, something that I really don't like to do a lot, you know, because for many reasons. It's either really intense because I'm doing things that are very personal to me, difficult to process, that this is how I process them, you know, so it's not, you know, it's definitely not comedy, you know, so, you know, so, and then there's this like, the critique that I bring, that critical eye, that you're constantly like looking into a project as is, you know, like, what can I do better? Or like, how is this translating into something else, into some different medium? Or so it's not fun, not only for myself, but for my crew as well, because then I'm just like obsessing over some things, and, you know, so, so yeah, but thank you.
Totally. So this question actually comes from me. I was really interested in how you, I mean, we kind of touched on this with some questions about installation, but in how you display your work. And you're creating these almost like sculptures to display your work on. And I was wondering if you think about the actual objects and how much that plays into the entire piece, the objects themselves. But then also I noticed in one of your pieces that the viewers are laying on the ground. And I wonder if you are considering the viewers and how you want them to actually physically view your work when you're designing these, and if you can just talk a little about
absolutely. That. Yeah, no, I'll start with that, because physicality of the body is very important. Definitely have that in mind, you know, like where things are, how big they are, how are they relating to the audience, because to me, that's the whole point of me working within this installation medium, you know, because, you know, all of these elements are right there for you to use to make a point, you know. So if something is super tiny and they have to like come really close to it, you are making a point with that, you know. There's intimacy, versus when something is humongous, you know, like then you know, the relationship of the audience to that either projection or whatever it is, you know, becomes very different. So I always have that in mind. And you know, I'm fortunate enough that my husband is an incredible sculptor. So every time I come up with these things, you know, like he can just build whatever I do. And he was also, DripDrop Collective was between me and him and Todd. And I was like, you know, the vision, and, you know, Sunny and animation, and then Sunny was sculpture, and Todd was sound, you know, like, so we very much like kind of worked, so I could always imagine all these things that I myself could not really make. But then, you know, like he's more than happy to do that, and you know, like we collaborate in that way. So I scaled it down, you know, like in from those days when we were actually a collective to now when I'm work really, you know, on my own in one way, in one sense, you know. So but he definitely helps me realize them, you know, if I need to make something. And in future, yeah, that's why I believe in collaboration, because, you know, I'm aware of things that I'm really good at, and I'm very much aware that of things that I'm not good at. So, so I would rather invite people with talent to work on projects with me than try to distract audience with lack of craftsmanship, for example, that I would have, you know. But because it is very important how audience really experiences, you know, every single object that is in an installation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the pieces are totally immersive, which is amazing. Yeah. Are you up for a few more questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Awesome. We have one from Lana. She says, Daniela, your work is brilliant. I'd love to know more about your technical process of the animations. Do you create the drawings, cut them out, and then film them? How many different programs are you using in this process to create the final film?
Mm-hmm. So it starts with, I do either rotoscoping, which means that, you know, like I'm tracing from film, from videos, you know, that I break into individual still images, you know, and then I pick and choose what I'm going to trace and all of that, or I actually draw. And they always, I mean, I can just reach out and show you. This is, for example, one of the sequences from Jared, and it's really just drawings that I then scan, and they become digital. And I really don't mess around too much. Like I go through Photoshop to just, you know, knock out the background and all that stuff. And I don't like to, you know, mess around with the image too much because it becomes too digital. Like the whole point with the paper is so you can actually see all the imperfections on paper that happen on paper. And once they're scanned in Photoshop, I create sequences that then go into After Effects, where I compose them into separate sequences that then go to Premiere, where I edit with audio. Yeah, no, I mean, it's Adobe, you know, but it's very much analog at the beginning. And then, you know, like it goes into, you know, like how moving image is made today. I definitely embrace technology, obviously, you know, like, but I like to have paper trail.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the drawings are so beautiful. I would, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that you know, I love to draw. I would rather spend hours on end drawing than moving keyframes in After Effects, you know, so that's really the difference, you know.
Totally. I hear you. Okay, so let's see. We have a question from John. Is your work inspired or tormented by you and your family's experience and memories from the Bosnia Wars, or both?
That's a good question. I would say both, because, you know, there's so much inspiration that comes from that place. Every time I go there, I think, oh, I bring notebooks and all this stuff as if I'm going to work and take notes and whatever the hell I think that I'm going to do. But it never happens, because the place just takes you in, you know, like, and then you create from that experience, you know, because, and, you know, these things that happened in, to my family and myself, you know, we had a very hard, but still very lucky path to this point. I just feel that, like anything else that I approach in life, that, you know, hiding away from those demons really doesn't help, you know, so with trying to understand it and really face it, brings me to these two realizations, not only about myself, but, you know, like about how Bosnian culture persists, why I'm still so connected to it. Where does it exist really? Because it seems to me more and more that really that exists within us rather than the actual place, you know, since Bosnia has significantly changed after the war from the country where I've lived, you know, but the people are still, you know, they're not the same, but, you know, like, and it's hard to deal with these things. It's hard to, but I think that they have so much beauty in them. And I think that they're important to share. If any time now, it is so, I feel like it's so important to share these stories, to offer our vulnerability, to offer, you know, like these dark places that we all carry, you know, like, so we can, you know, like I said, I have a child that I want to present a better world to, you know, and I don't think that that's possible without us being empathetic to each other, to understand that, like, the, you know, that refugees are not just numbers, that there are people, you know, like, that are caring. And I have that experience, so I'm going to share. That's why, you know, even if it hurts, you know, that's how I feel, almost responsibility in a sense, you know, like, to bring that out, you know, like, and then, but yeah, no, it's definitely a combination of both. It, you know, like, you know, nothing comes without a price. So.
Well, thank you for sharing your vulnerability with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order just because this is related, but Rachel Wolf is says hi, and also is asking, she says, place seems so important in your work. Do you consider Bosnia itself a character
Yeah, oh
in
my
your
God.
work?
Rachel, of course. This is Rachel. Yeah, so in the Poured Water as I Leave, in our feature film, when my sister and I, you know, were discussing her role in this project, because again, she brings even, you know, she brings that prose, she brings that voice. And at first I was like, you know, since they're dancers, we're not having them talk. Maybe you can have like an inner monologue, but then there's two of them and like it would be weird and kind of cliche. And then when we thought about it, I was like, we need Bosnia. We need Bosnia as a character. And she like was like, then contributed in a way where she was like, I understood that Bosnia, the character of Bosnia that she will really write from, will address all these situations that happen to us, not just us, you know, like our family, but us as people in those situations that were beyond our control. That all of a sudden, like, you don't really, you just cannot navigate your own destiny because there's something beyond you that is, you know, controlling it. So when she's thinking about that, she was like, you know, gravity. She was again bringing gravity of Bosnia. That it's like so heavy over there that there's comparing to when she thinks about certain subjects here in the United States, because there's so much, you know, so much blood, so much, you know, like fear and all of these things that, you know, this last war wasn't the only war either. We have a lot of wars that happened on that like very tiny region, you know. So Bosnia will definitely is becoming this character that we're developing for this project, and this would happen the first time too. And I am so excited about it because it almost was our realization that we need to include that, you know, because it existed through all of these other projects and whatnot, but it was more abstracted, you know, like, because it was either through, you know, objects that are drew, or like through these little actions, or, you know, or like of the characters that I was drawing or portraying, or where they were placed, you know, like I'm thinking about an installation with, you know, a person like going berserk in like kind of closed into these squares and whatever. But this will be the first time that we're addressing that as a character. And yes, I'm so excited about that.
Awesome. I can't wait to see the full feature film.
Oh my God.
I'm sure you have a lot of work ahead of you, but I feel like I can speak for everyone viewing that we're excited to see it when it's ready. I think this will be our last question, and it's from Stephanie. And she's asking, who are some of your favorite storytellers, whether filmmakers, animators, artists, or writers?
That's a difficult question. There are so many of them. So
on the spot.
Yeah, you know, they really go from like different mediums. You know, I mentioned Rashad Newsom. He's my favorite new obsession that I have, because, you know, he tells stories in such a particular way, where he uses, you know, vernacular of a gesture and then tells a whole freaking thing with just modular repetition and all these things that I love his performances. Shireen Nishat was always someone that I was inspired by, since her work dwells on these, you know, lines between film and installation. I had a opportunity to experience Women Without Men in film format and then as an installation, and it just blew my mind, because it was, again, wasn't just like, oh, I'm just gonna project these scenes on screens and whatever. No, it was a very choreographed and well thought of interaction between multiple channels and multiple screens. As far as, you know, writers, there's a lot of, you know, writers from my country, you know, Ivo Andrić and people that probably come from my past, you know, like Tolstoy was a huge part of my upbringing, you know, through socialist Yugoslavia. But it also like brought in this romanticism of, you know, obviously Russia, but we are very close, like Slavic people, let's say it that way, you know. So, but it's the storytelling that I'm always, like with Russian literature, I feel so connected to, because of the way that they tell stories. And I actually had an issue with that when I was an editor, because the way that it made sense to me, it wasn't making sense for the director that I was editing to. And then we would like fight, and then realize that the story arc that she was following was very much a Western one. And the one that I was following was very much coming from the East, you know, because they're structured completely differently, you know. So, you know, but inspiration comes from everywhere. Seriously, I could spend so much time now talking about them. You know, it really comes from like different sources, different things. You know, Emir Kusturica obviously like was a huge impact. Marina Abramović, of course. You know, I'm thinking about people that are really addressing, you know, similar subjects like I do. Then there are young ones. There's a young artist that I had an opportunity to meet at the TBA a couple of years ago, Selma Selman, amazing artist from Bosnia that is a performance artist. And I would absolutely recommend following her. She's going to be huge. I don't know. I mean, really, like from, you know, music is a huge, like Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, like in their soundtracks. Like I usually listen to soundtracks when I make things because they're very visual. So, and maybe that's how I then experience life too. Everything is like really like a grand all the time. I would recommend it if you're listening to soundtracks, you just feel grand all the time. But Warren Ellis and Nick Cave are, they have a very specific sound that I am interested in. So is Goran Bregović, who did a lot of music for Kusturica and then on his own. But yeah, no, there's many. You can DM me or something and I'll send you a list.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniela, for being so generous with your work and your ideas and thoughts. We really appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I really wish I've seen all the people that have been here and present. And thank you all for being here. It made me really happy. I'm really grateful to share this kind of stuff, you know, and to share my work. And once the Pour the Water That I Leave is done, we'll make like a special thing for everyone, you know, like a special preview or something. I'm very excited about that. And yeah, I hope you all stay well, stay safe, all the good stuff, abundant in love and wealth and happiness. And yeah, I guess until next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
and
you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Yes. Good night.